Hi everyone and welcome back. This is the final video of this series in which I talk about the last and final stage of higher order learning, in which we apply the knowledge that we have gained after we have analyzed and evaluated the information that is shown here. So in this lesson, I'm going to talk about how we can use what we have figured out and learned on this mind map on the board after looking at all the terms and see how they are grouped and how they're related to each other and what effect they have and what we can do with that information afterwards. So in apply, basically now we see how we can use this to solve problems or to create solutions for something that we need to do. Like for example, you can see these food items in their various groups have various purposes. So apples and bananas give energy, rice gives energy because these are carbohydrates. So we could use this information in the real world to, like, let's say, make a diet for ourselves. Like we could say that, okay, I need to eat these food items every day if I need to get energy in order to do anything I need to do. And for the other food items, like beef and chicken, I need to eat those because I need those items for growth. So in my diet, if I apply this information, I could have that I need to eat for breakfast maybe chicken with rice, and then for lunch I could say I could have beef with rice, and then as a snack in the evening I could have an apple or a banana, and last but not least for dinner I could say that I could have again another meal such as chicken with rice. Now this is just a simple example. There's not much information here that we can anyway use and learn, but this just shows that if you look at information, no matter how simple it is, and you try to learn it in a higher order fashion, which is to analyze, evaluate, and apply, you can do a lot more with that information rather than just simply learning it as a list of facts that you need to know just the meanings of. Because if you think about it, once you do these three, which is to analyze, evaluate, and apply, you can use that information in a much more useful way. And you can get a much deeper understanding, because really what understanding is to have an idea, a good idea of what you're learning. If you think about it, the level of understand in lower order learning is simply a summary of these three higher levels. So if you were to summarize, analyze, evaluate, and apply, you would get actually this lower level, which is what we do when we are younger. Before we are teenagers, we study just definitions, facts. Basically, we look up in the dictionary to see what individual words mean, because at an early age, a person is simply learning new words. They don't have enough knowledge of vocabulary and grammar to be able to think of more complex ideas and concepts. So instead, they're just learning individual words one by one. And that's fine, because that's what they need to do when they're young. However, when you get old enough, you have to switch that lower order thinking and therefore learning into higher order thinking and learning. But unfortunately, in school, people are still stuck on the lower levels, which is basically to try and learn definitions and remember them, instead of thinking of information as a whole and trying to see the big picture as everything together and trying to study that, analyze it into groups, organize that information, and then see the value of that, what effect it has, how important it is, and then see how we can apply that information afterwards. And of course, what happens is normally people get stuck on the lower levels and then they try to apply that information by answering questions. But they can't do that because those questions rely on them having to analyze and evaluate the information first, which they haven't done. Instead, they've simply understood how you could say all the information in an isolated, summarized manner, which is what understand is, and then try to apply it at a higher level, which they can't, because they haven't gone through these other two stages, which are to analyze and evaluate the information as a whole, seeing it all together and trying to make sense of it in that way. And you can, of course, see from this that eventually, once you do all this, you will remember the information far better and more easily and quickly than you would if you were to simply just study the information in an isolated fashion, bit by bit, understanding only the definitions. Therefore, create comes much later when you have enough knowledge and you can come up with something new altogether. For example, here I've just shown how we can apply the information we have here in terms of our diet, but we could use this information in other ways also later on if we knew more, and maybe come up with new recipes of how to make new dishes which we could incorporate into our diet. But of course, the main thing is it's not about having to create, because when you're in school, you're basically still learning and even into higher education. And at that point, you don't have enough knowledge to create on your own anyway, like write a new book or come up with a new scientific theory or a discovery. That comes much later, and that's once you've acquired enough expertise in the subject you're studying, and normally happens after you graduate. So the best thing is to always, when you're learning something, to think of these three levels of high order learning, starting with analyze, then evaluate, and then apply. And this will naturally allow you to understand everything at a much deeper level and help you therefore to remember it more easily and quickly. So you don't have to worry about these lower levels at all, because they will come naturally after you have focused on these top three high learning levels. So that's it. That's all for the series. I wish you all the best in your learning. And if you have any questions, you can always contact me. Take care.